Yeah. Ruben Bravo, sir. So we're gonna start this conversation with how you doing, man?
Good, man.
What's going on?
I'm back from the dead. Your garlic little trick worked, so.
So people don't know this. You were dying. I talked to you. I called you on the phone, and it sounded like I was talking to your dog. It was just like,
Yeah.
and then a little ancient Native American trick, slicing garlic and eating that, and then that helps with your immune system. And I told you you'd be ready to go. This was on Wednesday.
We
talked this Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I told you by Thursday you should be ready to go.
Yeah.
Where if you go to a doctor, it's like antibiotics right away.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah.
And I think that now there's a book that I've seen it a bunch of times that I've never bought it, but it's a book that talks about natural home remedies.
It's a big book, right?
It's a big book,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it has like on the cover it has like all these plants and stuff, and garlic is one of them. You know. I know there's more. I mean, when I was a little kid, like I had my tonsils removed, so my mom would smear coffee on my feet whenever I got. Yeah, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they would, but I like the smell. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I never. I mean, I'm talking about like we were in Tijuana back in the day, so I had to be under 5 years old, so maybe like 3 and 4 years old. So I have memories of just having like coffee on my legs and smelling that. And then I just remember not getting sick. You know, like I would start getting sick, and then my mom would like put coffee and like wrap my legs, like my feet. I'm talking from like the calf down, on coffee, and then the next day I was fine. I was like nothing had happened. You know, so so there's a lot of knowledge, man, that it's not getting passed over because we start thinking about. Well, it's mom and pop's medicine. You know, there's no research behind it. Antibiotics work because the doctors say it works, but there's definitely something to it. There's definitely something to that old ancient knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, it worked, man. I was like, yeah. And I ate it, and it tasted horrible. And I'm sure I pretty much, didn't have a friend in the house for a while with my breath, but it was.
Did you burp?
Feeling better, man.
Because when you burp, it's like, oh, it comes back up, and you're like, God, please work.
Yeah.
So it's crazy, man, because now I was watching a documentary where big pharmaceutical companies are sending people to places like Brazil, to the forest, to start probing into their knowledge and showing them all this like roots and parts of the tree, the leaves and the fruits and stuff like that, and what their perception of what that heals, and start fabricating that into a pill, into a medicine. So it's so I think we're definitely starting to enter an age where we're starting to understand and respect that ancient knowledge and extract those things and make it readily available for the world. Because Brazil, you're talking about the Amazon, they have plants that you wouldn't recognize as plants from this world. You know, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. So
I mean, if you think about it, it's impossible to, at least in my profession, to have all that contact with people and not get sick. But I think they were saying, oh yeah, all these people are getting the flu, and it was only 10%. The flu strand that they gave for flu shots was only 10% accurate. So, you have all these people that are kind of coming down with the flu, and they're like, hey, I got the flu shot, I don't know why I have the flu. Well, it's kind of a shot in the dark, right? We take this strand, hope it works, and take this strand, hope it works. But it seems like some of these medicinal natural remedies, you know how much you're using, you know what to use, how you're going to hurt yourself on garlic, and you're really not.
Right, exactly. And I've never taken the flu shot, not once.
I took it last year for medic school, and that's the worst I've ever gotten sick in my life.
Right.
Worst I've ever gotten
I've
sick.
never had it, and like I said, it's ever since my wife like introduced us to this whole garlic thing. It's the only thing that I use. Now my problem is also like my nose is like fucked up from wrestling, so I'm not even sick right now, and that's the amount of air that I get. So I'm always very prone to getting like sinus infections, and I do get them a lot. And like for example, I think it was like at the beginning of the year, I ended up in antibiotics back to back for sinus infection, just because I don't have that. I can grab my nose and shift it side to side, and I don't have like a flat nose, but I can push my nose all the way into my face, and it's just from wrestling and jiu-jitsu and wrestling with guys that are, I never wrestled past like the high school level, but I've wrestled with guys that wrestled at the Olympic level.
Dude,
like
using their head
and just being rough. And I mean, shout out to like Mike Romero For those of you guys who know him, you guys know what I'm talking about. I credit Mike with teaching me how to fight in jiu-jitsu because, and I think I started training with Mike when I was either at the end of my blue belt or early purple belt. And I had a lot of success in competition already, winning like local tournaments, medaling at the pants. And, but I don't think mentally I was ever in a fight. I had tough roles, but I was never in a fight. And Big Mike Romero, we're going to have him here because he has such an interesting, extensive story where he was one of the main training partners for Roland Gardner as he was training for the Olympics. So, and he wrestled with Russians. And I mean, the exposure to the world caliber wrestling gets there. Yeah. And there's nothing soft about Mike. He doesn't know how not to fight. Yeah. Whether it's wrestling, whether it's takedowns, whether it's jiu-jitsu, it's a fight, Yeah. And like I said, like I knew like jiu-jitsu wise I had the technique, but he was fucking me up. Like the first time we rolled, he shows up with a white belt, and I know he looks like a wrestler, but I don't know any of his background. And he's fucking me up in intensity and just the chin strapping and grinding your forehead into the, what I do now came from him. Yeah. Just being in a fight in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I'm gonna make this miserable for you.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Like, win, lose, or draw, this is going to be miserable for you, And I remember going home and I couldn't sweep him, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. And I remember going home just thinking, man, fuck this guy, Yeah. But that's him and Eddie Carrasco is another guy that I love dearly, those two, man. But I created those two with getting me to the next level in my competition is like that. I had never experienced that grind in wrestling and fighting in jiu-jitsu that those guys have, and it's just they go to dark places, man, in their head, Yeah. It's just what they're willing to endure, what they're willing to do for success. It's something that only through wrestling can you learn that and understand that. That's one of the reasons I put my kids in wrestling. I didn't give a shit about if they ever won state. I didn't care. Because obviously our thing is jiu-jitsu. And obviously, I want them to learn takedowns and base, and technique. But for me, more importantly, what I want them to learn is that dirtiness, that grind that you only learn in a sport like wrestling. Yeah. That you only learn in a sport like wrestling. Yeah. So that's what sent them there, Yeah. For one of the Pan Ams that Mike and I, when I competed, dude, I showed up like 8 pounds overweight. This is like 3 days before my fight, and Mike is like, dude, relax, you got this. So he tells me, he's like, I'm gonna help you cut weight. Okay. So I've told you the story, man. We go to one of those 24-hour fitness, and he makes me put on, like, I have my underwear, the pants, the plastic, a t-shirt, the plastic, sweatshirt, a hooded sweatshirt, and then the sweatpants, right? And he taped my wrist and my ankles, and everything was in 20-minute intervals. So I jogged for 20 minutes, I biked for 20 minutes. No, yeah, it was running, and then it was elliptical, and then it was bike, the easiest at the end, just the bike, just moving. You don't have to go fast, just move. And then at the end, we got in the sauna for 10 minutes. And like I said, dude, Mike lives in his own world, man. He's an animal. I fucking love him. But we walk into the sauna, and he had me keep all this clothing on. So we get in the sauna, and out of the door, there's a little window cut out in the door, and I can see a clock. So I sit down, and every time I move, I can just feel the water just moving inside the suit, So I get in the sauna, and then Mike goes, I'll be right there with you. I was like, okay. So I got in the sauna, a couple minutes go by, and I'm like moving, and I could just feel that. And I'm like, there's got to be 8 pounds of water in there. And then in walks Mike, and he's naked. And he's okay. And he looks like a shaved gorilla, man. You know, the funny thing about Mike is he looks fat. Like when you see him just like regular clothing, because he's so huge, there's so girthiness to it. But that dude is ripped.
Barrel chested.
Yeah, he's just fucking lean, man. And he's naked. I was like, God damn it, man. Fucking 10 minutes with like a naked dude in the sauna, you know? But like 5 minutes go by and I'm starting to feel like shit, man. Like my vision I'm not feeling good. So I try to be like real casual about it, you know, like the old knee slap. I was like, hey, so yeah, 5 minutes went by. It's a lot of water. I can feel it. And I'm going to step out. I didn't even ask him. I said, I'm going to step out. And Mike just doesn't even look down. He's just kind of like leaning forward. Just fucking muscles and nakedness. And he goes, I told you 10 minutes. And he said, no. He's direct as fuck. He goes, you can shut the fuck up and sit down. Or we can fight for the next 5 minutes. And I'm going to keep you in here. And I thought about it. And I was like, I'm tired. I'm thirsty.
Dehydrated.
I don't feel, I'm dehydrated. And this dude is naked. I don't want to fight him.
Yeah.
So I sat down, dude. I sat down, and then at the end, like, we came out, and I was feeling like shit, but I made the weight. And you know, went and fought, and I think that was just a brown belt. And dude, fought some phenomenal people. I ended up only getting bronze in that one, but, you know, that was the dark era of jiu-jitsu. Like, we still didn't know how to train.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like showing up 8 pounds overweight at the pants is completely responsible. It's something that I've never done ever since, you know? So, but, yeah, man, it was, like I said, it was the wild days of jiu-jitsu. So
Yeah, he learned.
you learned, no regrets, you know, no regrets. But, yeah, it was a good experience. You learn from it, you know, but Mike Romero and those guys, man, there's like I said, there's something about how they see challenges that they don't waver, they don't break, they just keep pushing forward, man.
Yeah.
They just keep pushing forward. So I walked into my son's wrestling practice, and they were talking about this Bravo kid that is wrestling in Sunnyside.
Uh-huh.
What's his name?
Roman Young Bravo.
Roman Bravo.
Yeah.
How are you related to him?
It's probably a cousin of a cousin. Just kind of one of those Bravo things. Funny story is when I first met Paul kind of asked me if I was related to the Bravos, and I had a funny story. I was wrestling at Tucson High, and there was a Sunnyside coach, and he thought I was one of the wrestling Bravos. I did some wrestling in junior high, I think 7th grade. Me and Bronson, actually.
Back then?
Yeah, so Choya would come down, and they would put on a wrestling camp at Valencia Middle School. And so there was kind of like a wrestling room, man, and they'd put the mats down, and so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we went to that camp every year, wrestled together. So and then my uncle also, he went to Choya, and he wrestled all 4 years. I think he lettered all 4 years, real close with, Ed Carrasco, those guys. He went to Pima and wrestled when they had that program over there. So I grew up just kind of getting slapped around by a wrestler, and he's this little short 5'3" dude, you know what I mean? Just tough as shit, cowboy. So, yeah, man. So, they thought I was going to be one of those Bravo wrestlers, and, I didn't, there was a minimal. I knew maybe like a double and a single leg.
So what's that story where the guy, so you walked into a wrestling practice and the guy expecting you, knowing that you're a Bravo, the guy expects you to have this wealth of knowledge in wrestling.
Yeah, and I think I don't even know how to shoot. You know what I mean? Like
to this day,
a high C till this day. A high C.
We're working on it.
Till this day. So yeah, and I kept telling him like, hey, can you show me this? And he was like, oh, you know how to do it? And I'm like, no.
Aren't you a Bravo?
Aren't you a Bravo? I don't know how to do it, man. Just teach me. So that was kind of the joke, and I was like, I'm not that fucking Bravo. Like, I'm not
it's
that one.
the other side of the tree.
Yeah,
the other Bravo.
That's
you went the boxing route.
I did. Yeah, I went the boxing route. Kind of got a little community service, and I got sent up to Centro Sur Boxing Gym to do it.
Where is that? Or where was that?
It's on the south side, 22nd and 10th, South Tucson.
Okay, so it's currently called Aslan, right?
It's currently called Aslan, but back in the day it was called Centro Sur. Aslan was a specific club. They had like 3 different clubs running in the same building. Right. So I was kind of young there. That's where I first got exposed to it. Went off, played some high school football. Got done playing ball, and I was like, hey man, I kind of miss I miss the grind. I miss the hard work. I miss the physicalness of it, and just grew up watching boxing as a young kid. You know, watching Chavez and those guys we talk about, Duran and.
El Cholo,
dude.
dude.
Yeah, I love fighting. You know, I did it a lot when I was young, so I figured I'd step in there, and that was a different time too. I think, where you talk about these mics and you talk about what was going on in Tucson. I think you had two specific boxing programs, and you had Joel Grandano, who he taught USA versus Mexico, USA versus Russia, and another junior Olympic team. So he was the coach, the coach to be coached, and it was one of those things where you got in there, you grinded hard and you sparred, and if you took a step back, you're gonna get it pushed in real good. So
because it's a Mexican style,
yeah,
right? Mexicans don't move back, dude.
Yeah,
Mexicans
we
don't
talk
move
about
back. They don't move
like
back.
Mike just grinding it out, just beating the shit out of you. He taught us that every single second, it was whether we were punching them or not. You make them uncomfortable. You make them move where they don't want to move. You put them in a corner. You're touching them. You're putting your shoulder on them. You're sweating on them. You're talking shit. Whatever it takes, you make them uncomfortable, and you break their spirit.
But it's that Mexican style, man, moving forward. So it's a high guard, right? It's high guard, moving forward, and you're not even punching. So whether you're jabbing or not, you're just moving forward,
Yep,
just
head
constantly
movement.
putting pressure, working the body, working the head.
Mm-hmm. And you take, a couple, take 3 or 4, and then you give them that one good body shot, and you start breaking them down over time. So, I grew up with, training around Ruben Bravo, an Olympian JCV Strigo, who was actually from Utah, who came down, and so there was a good stable of fighters kind of going on around that time that I got to train around and learn from.
So where'd that take you, man? So you started boxing there. Where did you go with that?
We did some amateur stuff here and there. I went and trained with some pros. I went up to Utah and trained down there, and just being around the boxing community when it was kind of at its best. De La Hoya was down here, Sugar Ray Leonard was down here. Got to be in contact with those, and man, I think for a while it was just boxing. I don't think I was doing anything aside from going to Pima for a couple classes and wake up at 5 a.m. I was in the gym at 5 a.m. and then I was in the gym at 3:30 again. So, and then eventually, it kind of led me to a guy who was a firefighter, and he had done some boxing early in his days. And I was just asking about his job, and he was always like, "Oh yeah, I did, had a good day at work today." He was always happy about his job, so I was like, "Oh, what do you do?" And then decided to go to the fire academy, and that's kind of where I met Phil. And Phil's my cousin, so we went to high school together, and we're like, "Hey, we're here at the fire academy again." And I think in the midst of getting worked and beat down, he's like, "Hey man, you should try jiu-jitsu when you get done." And I was like, "Cool." So took me down with you guys
to the first Damian, right, where we had like it's called so people that are still around from that era for us, they call it the incubator, because it's just like this tiny little thing.
It was a hole in the wall, man.
It was, but it's how we got started, right? It's how we got started. So we have to get something going, you know. So it's how we got started, and then we just created an atmosphere, and then that attracted more and more people, and then I think we were only there for like 7 months, and then right away we moved into like where we are today, which we're like one of the biggest academies in that area, Math Space. The program's like so many classes, like we're almost open the entire day, with like a few breaks here and there, but we have the people that we have here, man, that's just amazing, with so many different walks of life and background, and just to see like the camaraderie and everybody having fun and laughing, that's honestly, that's what you can teach the best jiu-jitsu in the world, but if you don't create a positive atmosphere where people can come in and better themselves, you're doing it wrong, so that was always our focus, so.
And it worked, man. It worked. It was I think for me, I have the pleasure of seeing it go from something like that to what it is today. You got 2 classes on 2 separate mat spaces, you know what I mean? That's huge. And now on a bigger scale, you got a gym on the south side,
right, with Philip Aguilar.
So Philip's running the Erie, and then you got another one opening up in Twin Peaks, which is exciting.
Coming soon in April.
It's amazing to see the exponential growth, and it's also amazing to see Brazil or jiu-jitsu as a sport growing in Tucson. At one time, I think you would look up jiu-jitsu and it was,
2 or 3 academies.
Yeah, at the most.
2 or 3 academies at the most.
Guys you work with, or hey, my friend trains jiu-jitsu, or my kid trains jiu-jitsu at this place, and you might have never heard of it, or it's new, or so it's growing. It's pretty cool to see.
I've always firmly believed, man, that jiu-jitsu done right, it can change the world, it can change the chemistry of a city. And I'm really hoping that that's what ends up happening with Tucson. Honestly, I honestly hope so. It could go wrong. It could go wrong. Like you could still, like the old days of jiu-jitsu of like, yeah, we had jiu-jitsu and yeah, we had 2, 3 academies, but it was such a toxic atmosphere where one coach was feuding with another, you know. Rivalry is good, but everybody should still wave the same flag of jiu-jitsu, you know. We could fight as hard as we can on the mats, but it doesn't stop us from come together and getting to know one another as friends, which is kind of where we are right now, you know. But it took a long time. It took a long time to get there. It took a lot of just taking the high road, you know. Like when we opened the academy, you would get, you know, you had people that were great from like day one, you know, like David Riley, great from day one to this day, great guy. But there were other guys that were kind of neutral, where they just kind of looked at you. And then there were other guys that hate you, and you know, and they would throw like little venom here and there. And it was tough. You kind of had to keep focused on what was important. What was important is the development of your students and the development of the community, the development of the academy. You know, so whenever people came to us with like the latest gossip, you know, I would always stop them and I say, okay, before you tell me what you're about to tell me, let me ask you something. Does it benefit my students? Does it benefit my academy? Does it benefit the community? Or does it make me better? And they would look at me like with this puzzled look in their face, and they'd be like, well, no. And then I would tell them, I don't care. You know, take that somewhere else. You know, and they were trying to always go for like the pride, right? They were trying to always like, well, what this person said hurts your pride because of this. And I don't care, man. I don't care, you know. So, and that's where we at right now, man. So we're very lucky for Tucson to have this beautiful community, man. And I honestly think, like I said, man, if we keep this growing, Tucson can be a better place. And because jiu-jitsu does make you want to be a better person. There's the community that you create on the mats, the person that you have to be internally to be able to practice jiu-jitsu every single day. It requires a certain level of like a warrior behavior, you know, warrior mindset, you know, a code of honor, you know, that if you want to keep doing jiu-jitsu and be in practice and thrive, you have to be an honorable person. You have to be a good person, you know. You like to party, you like to drink. It's probably not conducive towards good practices, you know. You're always surrounded by kids that are constantly looking at you as an example, you know. So you're never tired, you're never hungry, you're never thirsty, and you're always full of energy. And you start creating that in your mind, and it starts showing in your body, you know. And then that's what you're constantly like pushing on people, you know. It's like always look for the positive in life. Always look for the positive. Always continue to charge forward, you know. Any setback, and that's the truth in jiu-jitsu. You either win or you learn, you know. And learning can never be negative, you know. Yeah. So I'm very excited, man, to see where like our jiu-jitsu community is. You know, I'm very, very excited to see where it's going to be in 5 years. You know, in 7 years that we've been open has already changed so much. I can only imagine the next 5 years. You know, so many more academies opening up, more towards like the south side, more towards the north side. I would love to see better jiu-jitsu in central Tucson, just because those are the communities that really need something positive there, you know. So I don't know, maybe in the future we'll put something there and try to help out those people. You know? Try to show them, you know. I always remember this story, man. There was this guy released out of prison when I started working out. And one day we had finished practice, and I'm driving out, and I see him walking down the street, you know. So I pull over, and I'm like, "Hey, man, do you need a ride?" And he's like, "Yeah." So he jumps in my car, and I'm giving him a ride. And he's so thankful about the people that he's surrounded by now, you know, like at the time, like the jiu-jitsu, the academy where we were, and it was a great group of people, you know, everybody having fun, regardless of the background. You know, you had people that were welfare, you had cops, you had, you know, firefighters, you had engineers, you had everybody just mixed in, you know, labor guys, and everybody was just having fun, inviting one another to events and stuff. And this guy was telling me that, and I'll always remember that. He goes, I'm very happy, man. He goes, I didn't know people didn't go to jail. I was like, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, for in my life, my reality is this. We're gonna get together and you show up and I'm like, hey, where's so and so? Oh, dude, he had warrants. Yeah, they caught him like on Wednesday, so he's out for like 2 weeks, or he's in for like 2 weeks. Oh, okay. You didn't panic. You weren't shocked. You weren't offended. It was just like, oh, okay. Dude, what's up with so and so? We're getting together. Where's our friend, our cousin?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, he was driving a suspended license. Or like he got caught with like, weed. They caught him smoking, or they caught him drinking. So he's in for like 2 days. Oh, okay. You just moved on.
Just part of doing business.
It's part of doing business in that community, and then he starts hearing about like the gatherings, like we threw a party and my kids were there and my wife was there and my cousins were there, my friends were there, and he never heard as part of that conversation like, oh, so and so wasn't there because they were in jail. So it changed his way of looking at life, just a little, it wasn't like a deep, meaningful conversation. It's just you being exposed to jiu-jitsu and the people that it brings,
Yeah.
So that's just one example, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I think it does it everywhere. I mean, I grew up the same way. My dad was in prison, and uncles get in an argument, or they had a DUI and they're locked up or something, or so it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's just when you don't know that there's any other possibility or that there's any better, that's just what you expect, right? But when someone kind of exposes you to a different lifestyle or a different path, or that there's a different option, or that's not the norm, then you're like, all right, cool. There's a different way to take. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah, I see jiu-jitsu just like boxing growing up. You see all these dudes come out, and they call it the sport of poverty. These dudes come out and it's somewhere, and Joe took in all these people to his home, and you walk in and get stuff out of his refrigerator, and I think naturally as human beings, we want to be around people. Now, whether those people are good people or not, and not necessarily good in the sense of they're just making the right decisions at that time. So in jiu-jitsu, it's a social aspect as well. It's it's also working out. It's also a martial art, but it's also, hey, we're a family, and I think people attract to that.
Right.
I mean,
we're born to kind of like be part of groups. So like you said, like whether it's something positive or not, still be determined, whether you want to be part of a group that just happens to be a gang,
Yeah.
But gangs play a huge role, man, in providing that support group for a lot of those kids that grow up with like their parents going to prison.
Yeah. Yeah.
Parents going to prison, or like broken up families, they play a huge role in it. But your dad, man, went to prison, and your dad was a powerful image, not only in your life, but just things that I've heard him, stories that I've heard about him. I've always talked to my kids about being responsible and being always willing to help others and be carrying others' load. But your dad said something very powerful about shoulders, right? Mm-hmm. Now he said that about your shoulders or his shoulders, because you posted a picture of your dad shirtless, and he was from the back, and he had this working man back.
Yeah, he was a big dude.
Like, I come from a pro wrestling background, and I immediately started thinking about like hitting him with a chair. You know what I mean? Like that's how he was
choking off the top belt.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, man. He talked about having those shoulders and for a reason, being able to carry the weight of the world. And I think a little history about my dad. So dad he was the oldest out of, if I'm not wrong, 11 or 12 or 13 brothers and sisters. I lose one every once in a while in there. But he came from that family, and he was the oldest. So his dad was a paratrooper, and one day they're coming home from the mines, and he was with his good friend. Coming home from the mines, car accident happens. My dad's biological dad dies in this accident. And in those last moments, he tells his friend, Duty, he says, hey, can you take care of my family for me? And I think at that time, it might have been my dad and 3 others. So at that time, Duty holds true to his promise. Duty was a Marine. He fought in the Korean War, and so he was like, all right, man. So goes, starts taking care of the family. Eventually, him and my nana fall in love. But from there, my dad was just kind of the oldest, trying to piece everything together, right? I think he was like 8, 9, and he just lost his dad. So my tata, my biological tata, was his buddy was in there. He was a Marine in the Korean War. So he said, hey, take care of the family. He ends up taking care of the family. But at that time, I think it was about a year later, my dad had a brother and sister. They were playing at Joaquin Murrieta Park, which is Western, on some dirt mounds, and his sister fell in, and into like the dirt kind of engulfed her, and he was there, and he was trying to pull her out. My dad was. He couldn't pull her out, so she died. And
Jesus, man. How old was he?
He might have been like 9. And it's sometimes hard to get the accurate dates on the story.
Yeah.
So then a couple months later, his brother Georgie died, who was close to the little sister right away. So my nana had just lost her husband and these 2 kids to death, and my dad was around to kind of see that also. Who knows what was going on, but I guess regardless of whether Duty was there or not, I think my dad always felt, one, responsible for what happened to his little sister, and in turn his brother after that. And then 2, like he kind of had to provide. So I think they were in Jollyville for a little bit on the west side in that barrio, and then they moved to what's called a mountain center, Little Africa now. And at that time, they were the first Mexican family in the neighborhood, because it was all African American right at that time. So my dad not only had to deal with that, but now he's really fighting for his life every day he comes in and out of school.
Right.
And I think he just he met a man that taught him how to fix cars, and so he was fixing up lowriders, and that was his passion, and that was
till the end of his life. Because I remember before he passed away, like just you hear like
he would
telling stories about
do it
fixing
for free,
cars,
man, and I'd get upset and I'd be like, Pops, why aren't you charging people, man? And,
gotta make money, man.
Yeah, and I think something was going on for him, man. I think he was changing at that time. But anyway, so of course, trying to provide and live in rough, I think that causes you to make some decisions, and he decided he was gonna move some weed, or he had been, who knows. And he was transporting a large amount of weed from California down here, and he got caught. So he got a couple years in Lompoc prison, and that was in the late 70s. So if you look at kind of what's going on with prison systems and the history of, these races kind of popping off, and you had, the Mexican mafia, there's all these politics within the prison system kind of coming off. He never told that many stories when I would ask him, and he kind of beat it around the bush. But if you talk about the history of what was going on with those things, that was happening in the prison system at his time. He told the story about, I think he was 18 when he hit the main yard in California, and being young, from Arizona, wasn't an easy thing at that time.
You weren't very welcome, yeah, man.
Yeah,
super territorial, and very races divided. Those prisons, especially back then, man.
Yeah.
Having worked in the prison system and knowing about its history, like back then, it was just, we didn't really care what happened to those people. You know what I mean? Like truly, like now, it was called prison, and now it's corrections, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether correctional behavior is really happening or not, that it's kind of like the theme. And like, for example, they are providing educational services for people. Back then, it was just kind of like, fuck, you're out, you're done, you're done with society, go over here. Mm-hmm. And society didn't really have a plan for those people. We would just throw them in there.
No, none at all. And so he did his time, and I remember him telling me, he said, man, I'm 18. And we didn't talk about this till I think I became a man, and he had a couple of drinks, and he just let it all go. And he said, man, I'm 18. I'm a big person, but I'm still a kid. I'm 6'1", I'm still a kid.
Right.
And I hit that main yard, and there was this dude from San Diego messing with me, and he said I had some family from LA, and so, they kind of took me in, and they said, hey, if that guy messes with you again, you better do something about it. And he's like, this dude was a grown man, he was bigger than me, so all I could do is, he said, all I did was just stuck a lock in a sock and waited for him to come around the corner, and he said I beat the shit out of him. And from then on, you still had to get your hands dirty, but he was like, I think that was the thing that kind of
Set the tone.
that set the tone. And so it was funny growing up because
Holy
if I ever
fuck.
had any issues, I was like in first, second
Lock in
grade,
the sock.
and he
Lock
was
in the
like,
sock.
Man, you just gotta set the tone. I'm not going to. He's like, I'm not going to prison, Pop. Shit.
Shit, dude. Well, that's so funny, right? Because we're also like we're not from that era, but we still have some of that thought process within us.
Yeah.
So, like with my kids, like when they were little and they were still in school, like I'm talking like elementary, they would be like, "Dad, this happened," and I'd be like, "You better handle it,"
Yeah.
and I thought I made myself clear. Then the next day, I'm like, "Did you handle it?" "Yeah, Dad, I told the teacher." I was like, "No, you find that kid and you punch him."
Yeah.
And eventually, like as they got older, and my horrible advices continued. They were like, "Dad, this is not prison. This is not Mexico."
Yeah.
It's like you can't do that,
Yeah.
which was the norm back then, even for you when you and I were in school. But it was like also the norm in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Like even principals, like or assistant principals, like there was something going on, and you had a problem, like it was recognized. Like the assistant principal would tell you, "Well, you better do something about it, man.
Yeah.
School is on the floor.
Yeah.
You better go handle that."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
You're like, "Are you telling me to go fight?"
Yeah.
Like that's where this society is, and that's exactly what society was back then.
Yeah. That's how he was, man. So he did his 2 years and change or whatever, and he came out. And one thing I give credit to my dad is he never went back, man. He did his time there, and he came out. Along the way, he had opportunities to snitch, and he never did.
Right.
He kept it real and came out. He did his time, and at that point, him and my mom, he had a little house on Menlo Park. Bought this little house, and he was working at the mines and just hard work. I'm sure at that time it was tough to find a good job, but he was working at the mines, and they had some strikes at that time, and then they had layoffs, and so from that point on, my dad just kind of went on. He was working at Ryder for a little bit, and then he would do some jobs here and some jobs there, but we moved around a lot, kind of growing up, and my mom got really sick for a point. So I think my dad, thinking back now, my dad did a great job with what he had, and kind of pulling things together, So
Right. It's amazing. man.
yeah, so he was a good man. We lost him early, but he was a great tata, and I think later in life, and even till this day, I'm understanding my dad more and more.
You appreciate things become clear.
Yeah.
Like the lessons that you're like, "Oh, this is what he meant."
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, that happens to me too, man. That happens to me too. Not so much with my dad, but like with other like adult figures, father figures that I had, where it was like, "Oh, this is what that person meant."
Yeah,
Yeah. But so, dude, that takes us into your early teenage, your adulthood, because one thing that you have a lot of experience in, and that I'm fascinated by is the ceremonies that you've been part of, right?
Mhm.
So you're a rebellious little kid.
yeah. Rebellious little kid. I think what was going on with me at that time is I was in high school, and my nana just died from cancer. My dad just didn't know he had diabetes, but the diabetes got so bad that he went blind.
Oh, Jesus.
So he's out of work now again, and we're looking at moving, and so I was playing a little football here and there, man. But I think I was kind of coming off of I really enjoyed playing football, and I was just getting into trouble, And I met this teacher, man, my junior year, and his name was Sean Arce. And I think he got tired of me bullshitting in his class, because I'd come in and put my head down, crash out or whatever, not pay attention. And one day he just asked me, he said, "Hey man, do you really want to be what everyone expects you to be?" And that's kind of what we talked about earlier, right? Like, I mean, my dad went to prison, whatever, like that's kind of it. The neighborhood I grew up in, that's what was happening. I had, cousins. The family business also was too. You just go work construction. You put up this fake rock at all these zoos. You get drunk. You come back and you visit Tucson, and then you shoot out again. And that's just kind of what the expectation was. So he just asked me, do you want to be what everyone expects you to be? Everyone expects you to be a failure. Everyone, expects you not do well in school, to do the absolute minimum, if that. And that kind of hit me, and so that caught my attention, and it pissed me off that he was talking to me like that. So he was this big dude, 6'3", he played football at the U of A, he was from Northern California, and he was young at the time. But he looked like me, he looked like people I grew up around, and here he is a teacher, so I listened to him, and the next day I went in and got to get to know him, got to get to know where he was from. And he just kind of dropped his seat. Well, one day he said, hey man, do you want to go down to a ceremony? I think it was, he must have saw maybe what I was going through in life, heard my nana died, my dad's sick. I think there was a couple times where I would just ask to stay in his class because I didn't have money to eat lunch, and he'd take me down to his office and either give me money or he'd give me some of his lunch, and for me that meant a lot to me, so he said, hey, do you want to go to the ceremony? And, I'll pick you up, I'll take you. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really know what it is. And we were kind of talking about history and like the Mexican history all the way back from the Aztecs, and I think at that time we were dealing with probably the revolution and what was going on at that time in the class. So he takes me down to this place, or what he was calling a sweat lodge out in Pascua, in Old Pascua.
Which was where?
I'm sorry, in New Pascua. So
New
New
Pascua.
Pascua is out by the casino. So you're talking about Valencia and Cardinal area.
That's New Pascua.
That's New Pascua. Okay. Old Pascua is going to be right there off of Grant area. Grant and just
Fairview.
Yeah, just a little
right?
bit east of the freeway.
Yeah.
So he takes me out there, and it's all I see is just big fire and this this little hut covered with blankets, and I'm scared, man, right? Because I don't necessarily know what's going on or what's in store. And so he gives me a little rundown a little bit, but I see all these big dudes, they're tatted up, and they look like the dudes that I would see from the neighborhood, but some look like me, some had long hair, and I'm like, oh, all right, what's gonna go down here? So we all line up and we go inside the sweat lodge, and they get these hot rocks from the fire that have apparently been in there for hours, and they take these rocks in, and you're sitting there in the complete dark. And growing up, we were Catholic. We wouldn't go to, my mom would go to church. I don't remember my dad going much. My nana was, always trying to make us go. But so we go in there, and they take those stones in there, and they're these, lava stones that you find on a mountain. And
Now, what do they call them?
they call them the abuelos, or the old ones, or the
old ones,
elders.
right.
Yeah. So the saying is that these old ones, to have a rock become a rock takes a long time, right? I don't know the science behind
Right.
it, or what minerals need to happen, or how long. It's a long time. So they say those old ones are the closest to the earth, and they know the most.
Right.
So they take those heated rocks in there, and they pour water on it, and there's all these elements that kind of go in, water, wind, fire, and the earth is in there. So they pour that water on the rocks, and steam happens, and that steam not only cleanses your body and your soul and your spirit, but it takes your wants and your needs, or what some would call prayers, up to whatever you want to call at that time. So I remember being scared, but I remember hearing these grown men talk about their struggles and talk about what they were dealing with, whether it be addiction, whether it be family problems, them finding themselves in these new ways, so to speak. And it was the first time that I heard a person pray directly to God rather than talk about God. So in church, it's like, hey, here's this sermon, or here's this verse. I couldn't tell you a verse if I wanted to, but
So instead of reciting a page, it was actually like a conversation.
it was a direct, and they were genuine. They were genuine wants. You know what I mean? It was like, hey man, like I'm really struggling. I'm dealing with heroin. I'm dealing with alcoholism. I lost my kids, or I lost so and so, or I lost my job. It was all these things that I had gone through in life. Moving a lot, losing a home, job loss, financial stress, all these things that were real to me. And I think it came around to me in my chance of prayer, and all I could say was just thank you. Thank you for allowing me or for bringing me here, Sean. And I came out, and I stood up, and I was still playing football at the time, and he goes, that's probably one of the hardest 2 days you've ever had to do. And I said, I don't really know if there's anything harder I've ever had to do, but to appreciate the air, to appreciate life after that, I think at that time my consciousness was kind of awoken to what's real in life for me, and what I needed in my life at that time. So real grateful to him that he kind of steered me off of the wrong path and gave enough and tried enough, because it wasn't like he just mentioned it one time. He had been on me for
Trying to get you to participate in this.
Yeah. And he stayed on top of it, man. He didn't give up on me. So that was my first ceremony, and from then on, every week, every Wednesday, I was in Bosco. I'd find a ride, or I'd catch a ride with him, or I met a guy named Chucho who would take me out there, a young dude, close to my age, and he'd pick me up, take me out there, and I'd sweat. And then it started turning from me just showing up, being a part of the ceremony, to me prepping the ceremony. So now I'm the one putting those rocks in. Now I'm the one cleaning that lodge out. Now I'm the one lighting that fire. You know what I mean? So it went into that, and then it went into some other ceremonies. I went into the teepee ceremony. I went into Sundance, and I went into the danza azteca. So all those traditional ways. And I think from probably about 17 until a good part of till little Ruben was born, 24, like it was pretty much kind of my full time. That's what life was at that time. So
what was the transition like from just sitting in those teepees, in the sweat lodge, where it's just kind of you going, like, having that conversation with God, with that spirit, and to like the first time where like medicine started being introduced into those ceremonies?
mm-hmm.
What was it? What was some of the experience that you saw people have? Was it a more of an enhanced, like, personal experience, meaning was it more of like just the fist clenching and crying because whatever they were going through, or was it more of like the outward, just like now they can finally express all this grief or tension they're having?
All the above. Some people, so for instance, in the teepee ceremonies, they use the peyote. And the peyote is, a long time, at least for the Mexican people, we're kind of the caretakers of it. And if you're ever interested in it, just kind of read the story of Quanah Park, because he came down here, he was sick. One of his tribe members got the medicine, took it back to him, and then that's kind of how the teepee ceremony arose, or the Native American church is what they call it, kind of arose. But that medicine, the caretakers were from Mexico, and they were doing the huicholes, and there's some other tribes down there that use that medicine in their ceremonies. But yeah, it was, for me, I think, to answer your question, it was different. It was different for people. Some people, were emotional about it. Some people kind of kept in whatever they were dealing with at that time. For me personally, I think, and the way I was explained was the peyote allows us to see us. It allows you to see you from a different perspective. And a lot of people think it's this like psychedelic TV trip where, you know what I mean, like all these
colors, but it's not, right?
It's not, man. The way I can explain it, and it's different for everyone, but for me personally, it was the first time I used it. It was me being able to look at me, in the sense of I knew I was kind of analyzing, where my tata came from and his struggle coming from Mexico up here, where my nana came from and the type of person she was, what my dad had been through, what my mom was really sick. She had some malpractice done to her early, like what she was going through. What I had gone through as a young person, why I had my fears, why I had my anxieties, why I was strong in certain areas, why I was me, but with all those things encompassed in it, right? So that was my first time using it and kind of seeing myself as to myself, right? And my fears as a person, I express them to you, they come out sometimes in fighting, right? But those are my fears, right? Like I didn't want to be poor ever, and I was scared of failure, and I was scared of not doing the right thing, letting people down. Those things are hard to deal with for me personally. So, what I might deal with when I'm studying with, and they say studying with the medicine, might not be the same thing you deal with, or might not be the same thing.
Right, we all have like our own personal baggage.
Yeah, or like Brenda deals with, or any other person that might come in here. So, but I saw every end of the spectrum of what someone might deal with. I've heard of people, being traumatized, being beaten by their dads in their life, and not being able to deal with that pain, and then just kind of throwing up, right? Because they're trying to get rid of all that pain and that experience from it. So it all depends, man. But in my opinion, beautiful ceremonies,
We're lucky to have that. So we're in Tucson, and those ceremonies are available to us.
Yeah.
But what's crazy about it is like you're talking about like people expressing the trauma, expressing expressing the pain, expressing their fears, whether it comes out in words, whether it comes out in tears, whether it comes out in vomit, however it's going to come out, it's going to come out. But I think that we live in a society that it's about suppressing, right? It's about suppressing everything that we do. Like our market of medicine, everything is opiate based. Everything's about numbing the mind. Just numb the mind. Just go through your everyday grind. Keep clocking in, clock out, go home, and just numb the mind. Your son has a great imagination, has a lot of energy. You don't want to deal with that? Numb the mind.
Yeah, ADHD.
And it's in our day, you didn't have ADHD. I heard a very powerful statement, and I think I forget what it was from, but they said when in the jungle, when the only test is to jump, even a powerful animal like the elephant fails. And I think when we're trying to create a society of slaves, meaning a factory life, manufacture, make others rich. You don't make any progress. You're kind of, this is the expectation, like you're expecting to make this much per hour for this period of life. Yeah, you put some money here and there, and then you'll have a retirement in place. But it's to make you fit into that box, it's numbing of the mind. Like that's, and I think like in the world it's starting to see, some of the issues of living that way for so long, meaning through the period of the 90s, like medicating the kids, man, was a norm. This is when parenting kind of stopped happening, and it was just kind of like, hey, my son talks so much during the classroom or during class, or he jumps around too much. Oh, he's hyperactive. Boom. And I'm not saying this is a perfect system, but for example, for me growing up, I had friends that were like that were hyperactive and couldn't really function in classroom. So, what's very common, like the Mexican culture, is like, okay, you're just not for the classroom. And it wasn't like you were being punished. It was just, you're not for that. And they would take you out of school and they would teach you a craft, something that you could use to take care of yourself later on in life. So you have so much energy, you're moving around, you're this and that, you're jumping up and down, you're in earth science or whatever it is in classroom, you don't give a shit about chemistry or engineering or anything like that. Perfect, man. Go be a carpenter.
Yeah. Go be a landscaper.
Go be a landscaper. But mechanic. But why do we look down on those things now?
Yeah. I think specifically, I think we struggle with, regardless, and I've heard it explained this way, right? So, me and you are both, of the Mexican descent, and those traditions follow. So in family,
thick ass sticks.
Yeah, you're a single kid, but also too you've had little cousins. So if you have a little cousin or a little brother or sister and they're having trouble, hey, go and help them out, right? They need help taking that trash out. Go help them, or they need help moving this, or go help your little cousin or your little brother, or blah blah blah. And then we get our kids in school, and now it's like, hey, I need help. Can you help me out? No. Keep to yourself. Right, so we go from being these pack animals, these again wanting that social, right? And
the phrase used to be said, right? Like it takes a village. Like it really took a village to raise a kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of like, oh, you're having problems. Shh.
Yeah. No. Oh, you need help. No one can help you. You have to know it yourself, right? And I think we're setting kids up for failure in a sense, because even we get out into the working world, when can you not ask for help?
Right.
I mean, very rarely, unless you're like, I don't know what job you do where you can't say, hey, I'm struggling with this, I need help with this, can you get help, or can you help me out? So I think we come from these tight knit families, and all of a sudden it's we want to shut everything they've been raised to do off, and it's hard for kids to deal with. You know what I mean? And yeah, and the same thing goes with medicine, like you're saying. It's huge, man. And those things are medicine, right? My tata picked opium in opium fields when he was younger, and you don't really consider and you don't think about the good things that come from opium, right? It makes into heroin, it's bad, but hearing him grow up and kind of talk about what he did, the peyote, it's a medicine, it's a study. The tobacco, right? They use those in ceremonies. Tribes all across are using that to study. The same with like fermented alcohols, you know, like the maguey, they use that to study. They study the stars, they studied ceremonies, they studied the earth, they studied agricultural processes at that time. But when you start depending on them is when you start abusing the medicine, you know?
It's what is it called? It's either a crutch or a wheelchair, right? And but that's everything, you know what I mean? So I think it's important to have our minds open to the use of these elements to open your mind, to help you through life, to help you overcome something. But when you start depending on those things just to face your everyday challenges, you're missing the point of what that's there for. You know, it's but just because some people choose to abuse it, man, it doesn't mean that we need to take it away from others.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's huge medicinal benefits to everything.
Yeah.
And then there's always going to be the ones that abuse it, you know. But again, I think I think our world is waking up from decades of false narrative as far as the dangers of this, the dangers of that, the dangers of marijuana, you know, the dangers of alcohol, the dangers of this. It's, yeah, if you abuse it, it's dangerous. But if you use it right, if you use it as how the natives looked at it, which is medicine, you don't take the medicine unless you're sick. Yeah. You know? So, dude, very excited, dude. Thank you for doing this, man. Thank you for doing this, sharing your powerful story, man, and for me to have you being part of the team. I know it's huge, and I can't wait for you to the other kids to get to know you and discover what a powerful influence you are on them. So
yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. It's exciting, dude.
Awesome, brother.
Right.
Thank you, man.
We'll see you.